I was really surprised recently how much I enjoyed re-listening to this one in Rainbows. I historically didn't think I cared much for this one. I thought it was just a failed experiment of good production, and whilst I may be more convinced of the production than the actual songwriting, the prospect of seeing this live isn't as exciting as the prospect of listening to this with the highest fidelity stereo equipment speakers of all time, perhaps, but it's nevertheless it's such an impressive and kind of catching, it's ear candy, but nevertheless a fascinating accomplishment, really pleasing experience if you're into the kind of more purely kind of sonically satiating angle of music production rather than the very pure and kind of clarity of songwriting, clarity of acoustic instruments. This is total revolver, we don't know if we can play this live. I don't know if they tried to or not, maybe they did. Technology was more capable of this sort of thing around 2007 and onward. Listening to this album, it sounded like something that I wouldn't be surprised hearing from an average art pop or kind of, electronic rock release in the later 2010s or 2020s now. Only groups of the budgets and funding of Radiohead were able to accomplish something like this in 2007, although it's become more of a domain of just the average, reasonably well-funded, rock/pop act of the current recording music industry environment. It's quite interesting. So we could call this album very ahead of its time, although to some who are really, really steeped in the music of the 2020s of today, without much interest in the past, in Rainbows might just blend in and they may not be impressed with it. And certainly, and this is something I don't care for as much in Radiohead's music, admittedly, is the overbearing presence of Tom Yorke's vocal, although I don't think it's quite as prominent in Rainbows as it can be on some other recordings, which is really nice. What I did find interesting about in Rainbows is I started to, because there was that meme at one point, like, where people were kind of questioning jokingly but in sincerity, like, what is Johnny Greenwood actually doing on an album like Kid A? This is the album where we realize, oh, he must have had a hand in the composition, because a lot of the kind of melodies and rhythms which may have been on Kid A/Amnesiac sessions been played with what would have sounded like a synthesized sound noise. We can hear Johnny plucking away at a guitar. Okay, very, very interesting. Maybe it was O'Brien as well. I don't know for sure, to be fair. Well, we're going to find out potentially, because we're going to read out aloud the background via the free encyclopedia of this particular album here. In 2004, after finishing the world tour for their sixth studio album Hail to the Thief, 2003, Radiohead went on hiatus. As Hail to the Thief was the final album released under their record contract of EMI, they had no contractual obligation to release new material. According to the New York Times, Radiohead were in 2006 by far the world's most popular unsigned band. The drummer, Philip Selway, said Radiohead still wanted to create music, but took a break to focus on other areas of their lives, and at the end of their contract provided a natural point to pause and reflect. In 2005, the singer and songwriter Tom Yorke appeared on the web series From the Basement, performing the Future in Rainbow's tracks Videotape, Down is the New Up, and Last Flowers. He released his first solo album, The Eraser, in 2006, an album I really wish I liked more, to be honest. The lead guitarist Johnny Greenwood also released his first solo works, the soundtrack's Body Sung, 2004. I've listened to that, I like it, I don't know if I love it. I haven't seen the documentary film it's meant to accompany, and There We Blood, 2007, great film, extraordinary soundtrack. March 2005, Radiohead began writing and recording in their Oxfordshire studio. They initially chose to work without their longtime producer Nigel Godrich. According to the guitarist Ed O'Brien, we were a little bit in the comfort zone. We've been working together for 10 years and we all love one another too much. The bassist Colin Greenwood later denied this, saying Godrich had been busy working with Charlotte Gainsbourg and Beck. At the Eva Festival in July 2005, Johnny Greenwood and Yorke performed a version of the Future in Rainbow's track Weird Fishes / Arpeggi with the London Sinfonietta Orchestra and the Arab Orchestra of Nazareth. Regular recording sessions began in August 2005, with Radiohead updating fans on their progress intermittently on their new blog Dead Airspace. The sessions were slow and the band struggled to regain confidence. According to Yorke, we spent a long time in the studio just not going anywhere, wasting our time, and that was really, really frustrating. They attributed their slow progress to a lack of momentum after their break, the lack of deadline and producer, the fact that all the members had become fathers. O'Brien said Radiohead considered splitting up, but kept working because when you get beyond all the shit and the bollocks, the core of these songs were really good. In December 2005, Radiohead hired the producer Spike Stent, who had worked with artists including U2 and Bjork, to help them work through their material. O'Brien told Mojo, "Spike listened to the stuff we'd been self-producing. These weren't demos, they'd been recorded in proper studios," and he said, "The sounds aren't good enough." However, the collaboration with Stent was unsuccessful. In an effort to break the deadline, Radiohead decided to tour for the first time since 2004. They performed in Europe and North America in May and June 2006 and returned to Europe for several festivals in August, performing many new songs. According to York, the tour forced him to finish writing the songs. He said rather than it being a nightmare, it was really, really good fun because suddenly everyone is being spontaneous and no one's self-conscious because you're not in the studio. It felt like being 16 again. After the tour, Radiohead scrapped their recordings and re-enlisted Godrich. According to York, Godrich gave the band a walloping kick up the arse. To focus them, Godrich transformed their rhythm tracks to a single track where they could not be further altered. According to Colin, the idea was to make us commit to something. It was as if we were sampling ourselves. And when you mash sounds together, like that they cross-pollinate, they marinate, they interact with each other, they have little sonic babies. York said the band attempted to create a sense of disembodiment by using elements from different versions of songs. For example, All I Need was assembled from takes of 4 different versions. For 3 weeks in October 2006, Radiohead worked at Tottenham House in Marlborough, Wiltshire, a country house scouted by Godrich. The band members lived in caravans as the building was in a state of disrepair. York described it as derelict in the stricter sense of the word, where there's holes in the floor, rain coming through the ceilings, half the window panes missing. There were places you just basically didn't go. Definitely had an effect. It had some pretty strange vibes. The sessions were productive and the band recorded Jigsaw Falling Into Place and Bodysnatchers. York wrote on Dead Airspace that Radiohead said started the record properly now, starting to get somewhere I think. Finally, during the recording, Colin Greenwood contracted temporary hearing loss and tinnitus brought upon by faulty headphones. That December, sessions took place at Holswell House in Taunton and Godrich's hospital studio in Covent Garden, London, where Radiohead recorded Videotape and Nude. In January, Radiohead resumed recording in their Oxfordshire studio and started to post photos, lyrics, videos and samples of new songs on Dead Airspace. In June, having wrapped up recording, Godrich posted clips of songs on Dead Airspace. Excluding Last Flowers, which York recorded in the Eraser sessions, the In Rainbows sessions produced 16 songs. Feeling Hazel to the Thief was overlong, Radiohead wanted their next album to be concise. York said, "I believe in the rock album as an artistic form of expression. In Rainbows is a conscious return to this form of 45-minute statement. Our aim was to describe in 45 minutes as coherently and conclusively as possible what moves us." They settled on 10 songs, saving the rest for a bonus disc included in the limited edition. The album was mastered by Bob Ludwig in July 2007 at Gateway Mastering in New York City. In Rainbows incorporates elements of art rock, experimental rock, art pop, and electronica. The opening track, 15 Step, features a handclap rhythm inspired by Fuck the Pain Away by Peaches. Radiohead recorded Cheers from a group of children from the Matrix Music School and Art Centre in Oxford. Bodysnatchers, which York described as a combination of Wolf Mother, new and dodgy hippie rock, was recorded when he was in a period of hyperactive mania. On All I Need, Johnny Greenwood wanted to capture the white noise generated by a band playing loudly in a room, which never occurs in the studio. His solution was to have a string section play every note of the scale, blanketing the frequencies. Radiohead recorded the version of Nude during the sessions for their 1997 album OK Computer, but discarded it. This version featured a Hammond organ, a straighter feel, and different lyrics. For In Rainbows, Colin Greenwood wrote a new bass line for the song, which Godrich said transformed it from something very straight into something that had much more of a rhythmic flow. Reckoner developed while Radiohead were working on another song, Full Ealing Pulled Apart by Horses. It features York's falsetto, frosty, clanging percussion, a meandering guitar line, piano, and a string arrangement by Johnny Greenwood. York described it as a love song, sort of. York described the process of composing Videotape as absolute agony and said it went through every possible parameter. He initially wanted it to be a post-rave trance track, similar to the music of Surgeon, and Johnny Greenwood was obsessed with shifting the start of the bar. Radiohead performed a more conventional rock arrangement on tour in 2006, with Selway's drums building to a climax. For the album, Godrich and Greenwood reduced the song to a minimal piano ballad with percussion from a Roland TR-909 drum machine. York said that the In Rainbow, lyrics are based on that anonymous fear thing, sitting in traffic thinking, I'm sure I'm supposed to be doing something else. It's similar to OK Computer in a way. It's much more terrifying. He said that, unlike Hail to the Thief, there was very little anger in Rainbows. It's in no way political, or at least doesn't feel that way to me. It very much explores the ideas of transience. It starts in one place and ends somewhere completely different. In another interview, York said the album was about the fucking panic of realizing you're going to die. That at any time soon I could possibly have a heart attack when I next go for a run. O'Brien described the lyrics as universal. There wasn't a political agenda. It's being human. Bodysnatchers was inspired by Victorian ghost stories, the 1972 novel The Stepford Wives, and York's feeling of your physical consciousness trapped without being able to connect fully with anything else. Jigsaw falling into place was inspired by the chaos witnessed by York when he used to go out on the weekend in Oxford. He said the lyrics are quite caustic. The idea of before you're comatose or whatever, drinking yourself into oblivion and getting fucked up to forget. There is partly this elation, but there's a much darker side. The In Rainbows artwork was designed by Radiohead's longtime collaborator Stanley Donwood. Donwood worked in the studio while Radiohead worked on the album, allowing the artwork to convey the mood of the music. He displayed images in the studio and on the studio computer for the band to interact with and comment on. He also posted images daily on the Radiohead website, for none were used in the final artwork. Donwood experimented with photographic etching, putting prints into acid baths and throwing wax at paper, creating images influenced by NASA space photography. He originally planned to explore suburban life, but realized it did not fit the album, saying the music took a different direction and became much more organic, sensual and sexual, so he started working with wax and syringes. Suburban feel, that makes me think of Eno and Burns' Everything That Will Happen Today, which came out in 2008, the following year, I think. He described the final artwork as very colourful. It's a rainbow, but it is very toxic. It's more like the sort of one you'd see in a puddle. Radiohead did not release the cover for the digital release, preferring to hold it back for the physical release. The limited edition includes a booklet and containing additional artwork by Donwood. There we go. If one is so inclined, do explore In Rainbows again, or better yet, give your own thoughts on the album if you feel the need. I'd love to hear how I've not summarized this well enough, how this video was worthless, or how the group are overrated and deserve to be destroyed. Those are always interesting comments to read. I'm not a fanatic of the group. I enjoy their albums, but I don't think they're the be-all, end-all, and I don't think anyone who's who was listening to music from the 70s and 80s, and then Radiohead came around in the 90s and 2000s, and they thought, yep, this is the greatest music I've ever heard. No one. It's just people that Radiohead was formative on them, and then they have to fall back upon. Nothing can beat that formative experience, which that kind of initial, it's like a language you first learn, then it's difficult to learn other languages. That was Radiohead for so many people, I suspect. I don't know. Anyway, if you're so inclined, again, In Rainbows, Radiohead, share your thoughts, listen to the album. More importantly than that, have the best possible day you've ever imagined.